This is TWiT.
All right, so cryptocurrency advocates are constantly, I would say, I feel anyways, they're constantly looking for signals that are going to further legitimize its existence. In the past few years, there's been no shortage of those signals. We're seeing them left, right, and center. One big one came yesterday by way of the President of the United States. And joining me to talk about Biden's executive order on crypto is Nikhilesh D, or Nick D, Managing Editor of Global Policy and Regulation for Coindesk. Welcome back, Nick.
Hey, good afternoon.
Hey, it's great to get you back. We appreciate you returning. Let's talk a little bit about this executive order. And I don't know, am I fair in saying that crypto advocates are looking for these signals to legitimize? Because as I was reading that, I was like, oh, maybe I'm speaking for a lot of people, and that's not actually true. But I feel like we're seeing a lot of these lately, and this falls into that camp. What do you think?
No, I think I'd have to agree with you. You know, it's hard to say that there's a stronger sign that, the world that we are aware of is taking, notice of crypto than the sitting president of the United States saying, yes, this is a thing, and our country should have a plan for, overseeing this and making sure that we are not left behind as this technology grows and develops.
Yeah, because I mean, and even on this network, there have been guests in the past who, when crypto comes up as a topic, you either get the, there's a lot of potential. This is very powerful. This is very empowering for, democratizing everything. Or you get the other side, which is like, I don't understand. This is all a scam, blah, blah, blah. And then now we have the president, like you said, the president of the United States, basically, blessing its existence, at least through this executive order. So let's talk about that a little bit. What exactly does it call for? I realize it's not like he issued this executive order and, the massive landscape of crypto is changing overnight, but what is this kind of setting in motion?
No, you're absolutely correct. So what the president signed yesterday basically says that all the federal agencies that might be looking at crypto, which includes the Treasury Department, the Commerce Department, some national security agencies, a couple others, including independent, regulatory agencies, should coordinate their work on developing, guidance for the cryptocurrency industry. It does not itself try to lay out what that guidance should look like. So there's nothing saying, securities law should be applied, XYZ, or banking law should be applied more XYZ. It rather says that these agencies should be, working together. They should have certain tasks that they are now assigned. So the Treasury Department has to compile a report on the future of money. Other departments have to come up with frameworks and reports as well, although they're not quite explicitly described as such. But basically, the White House is saying, okay, if you're looking at crypto, you should be doing this, and you should tell us what you're talking about and what you're thinking. And they have some deadlines. 6 to 12 months, I think, is when we're going to start seeing the results of these. But it's really just saying, we have to do what we're doing, but in a more coordinated fashion that could lead to actual guidance.
It talks, and you write about the future of money, and I'm just kind of curious, from your perspective, covering and knowing so much about this landscape to begin with, when the governmental agency goes in and starts to kind of understand what the future of money might look like, what exactly are they looking for, and what do you think that might look like, given your experience and your expertise in this?
So what's really interesting is that it's talking about the future of money, and it's including digital assets, but this report looks like it might actually look more broadly at the current financial system. And so we're not just talking about, whether or not crypto will replace banks or anything like that. We're talking about, can crypto or digital assets, as they're described in the executive order, help individuals who are currently in banking deserts, people who are not currently served by the financial system that exists today, which is something that the crypto industry has been talking about for quite a while now. I think these questions are probably broader than just the industry itself. There's certainly a lot of, issues that the industry has not yet been able to solve, although people are trying. And, we're talking about financial inclusion. We're talking about being able to access, financial resources, whether you're in areas that, perhaps you don't have a solid internet connection. And so you can't access online payment services like PayPal or, your bank account. Perhaps you're in a place that doesn't have a lot of banks, and other solutions have been postal banking, for example. And so what this report seems to what it seems like this report will look at is, how to solve these issues and what role could digital assets play in that.
Okay. And you also wrote a little bit about the digital dollar, which obviously this falls in line with exactly what you're talking about. It calls on the report itself, or the executive order anyways, calls on an evaluation of what that actually might become. And I guess when I hear about a digital dollar, what I start to think about is like, how does something like a air quotes digital dollar compare to what already exists in the crypto space, what we're already used to seeing, or are they one and the same? This is just one version of crypto that is kind of sanctioned by the U.S. government. If that exists, how might it? Because I imagine it will. How might it actually differ from what's out there right now?
Yeah, great question. I mean, it's definitely early days. There are a couple different schools of thought on this, right? So you have, one party that thinks a digital dollar or any kind of central bank digital currency will be just a digital form of whatever's issued by the central bank. So we kind of have that today, right? When you're using the dollar, when you're using credit cards or online banking services, you're not physically handing cash over to, whoever. So to one extent, a lot of the banking that we do right now is already digital. If you try to put, the crypto specific, look at that, it's this idea that you'll have a a central bank issued currency that's built upon some kind of a blockchain. But critics of this say that, it's going to be centralized. It's not going to be decentralized, which is a core tenet of cryptocurrency. And so, maybe it's not a pure cryptocurrency from that point of view. And then you have the camp that says, private stablecoins or cryptocurrencies pegged to existing currencies like the dollar could be a form of digital dollar, but they need some kind of government, endorsement. And, there's a couple groups right now trying to say that, this system exists, or these types of, stablecoins exist. They can be utilized by the U.S. government, and they can be therefore, turned or modified to better serve, again, the individuals who might need access to these services.
Interesting. Now, as I was kind of like reading through and understanding this, and also recognizing that it's, cryptocurrency has been around for a while, and we're just now, here it is, 2022, we're now getting to the point to where the U.S. government and those in D.C. are actually paying enough attention to start really looking into what is the future here as far as this is concerned. And I start to wonder about the real motivations underneath. I know what you talked about is like protecting investors. Obviously, that's something that is worth investigating, because crypto is so wild, and in its fluctuations, people can really get themselves in a lot of trouble. So of course the government's going to want to protect the investors if they can. Is this more motivated by controlling the crypto, like getting some sort of control over the industry itself? Or do you feel like this is actually more about kind of embracing what the future could hold, like embracing the future of cryptocurrency? Like on one hand, it feels like a reactionary thing, like, we don't understand this. We've got to get some control. We've got to protect people. But on the other hand, it's embracing the fact that maybe this is the future and we don't want to be left behind. What are your thoughts there?
No, I think you're right that this is to some extent reactionary, but I think it's reactionary to, to me, the key point was in December 2020 when the Trump administration introduced a kind of last minute rulemaking to control or impose certain regulations on unhosted wallets. And the industry was very upset because it was actually technically impossible for unhosted wallets to comply with certain know your customer regulations that are normally applied to just bank accounts or exchanges or companies that have this information to comply with existing bank secrecy law. And it feels like we've had a number of moments over the last year and a half or so where the industry has really made itself known in Washington, D.C. And I think that this executive order is partly an acknowledgement of the influence and the size of the industry. I think part of it is also maybe less control, but more trying to get a grasp of what's going on and preventing another situation where like the subprime mortgage crisis or similar financial crisis where you have this perhaps not entirely well understood financial sector that is getting a lot of money and a lot of attention, but also, as you noted, has volatility and poses this risk to investors who might not be fully up to speed on what they're doing. And the executive order is kind of a first step to making sure that we don't have a meltdown, at some point that leads to a actual, recession or other kind of financial disaster for a broad swath of consumers.
Yeah, that right there, that resonates pretty deeply. I can imagine that as well. Right now, while everything is particularly topsy-turvy. And to that end, I think my final question here is, how much of this, is this a bipartisan understanding in DC that this needs to happen? Or do some beliefs or ideas about what needs to happen in the realm of finance as relates to cryptocurrency, like, is that a bipartisan understanding, or are there two very different sides here? And what is this is this an example of that?
There's definitely a bipartisan desire for clearer regulation around cryptocurrencies. Lawmakers from both parties have introduced bills, and they've introduced joint bills seeking to, establish, for example, more specific tax guidance, or to better understand, whether or not a federal regulator can oversee crypto spot markets, which are currently overseen at the state level in sort of, this fragmented two-tier bank regulation system that we have in the U.S. So there's definitely this bipartisan desire, which what is really interesting to me about this executive order is that there has been bipartisan praise for it. You have Republicans and Democrats both saying that the executive order seems reasonable. One of the concerns was that it might impose regulations just out of hand, and we haven't seen that. And so, it's calling for congressional action, it's calling for agency action, and I think a lot of lawmakers are, I wouldn't say hopeful, but they're looking at this as, not a bad idea. They think that this is working out. Of course, now, we have to wait for the actual regulations and the actual proposals to come out, and that might, change things. But at least for the moment, there's been a lot of praise for this.
At least at the moment, everybody's equally curious. And then, once the things start getting written down as like, all right, here's our plan, that's probably where we'll see a little bit of the division, I'm guessing. But I hope not. I hope everybody is more, on the united front, because we just need a lot more of that in this world. So, Nick D, really appreciate your time. Appreciate you coming back and sharing your insight on this executive order with us. Nick is the managing editor of global policy and regulation at Coindesk. If people want to follow you online, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter. It's Nikhilesh Day. It's Nikhileshde.
All right.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. We'll talk with you soon. Take care.
Have a good one.